Thursday night, after 20 years of marriage, my 39-year-old stunning wife, the mother of our 2 daughters and the woman I believed to be my soulmate, dropped a revelation on me that I never saw coming. She calmly informed me that the following evening, she would be going on a date with a colleague from work. Her name is Lisa. We were just kids when we tied the knot, not even out of our teens. We hadn't been together long before she got pregnant with our eldest daughter, and the whirlwind of our young romance led us down the aisle. 7 months after our wedding, we welcomed our baby girl, Chloe, into the world. Our relationship was always full of passion and love, and over the years, we built a family. Our 2 daughters adored us, and I'd worked hard, building a thriving architecture firm from scratch. It grew beyond my wildest dreams into a multi-million-dollar company. We had a life many only dream of: financial security, a lovely home, a seemingly happy marriage. So when Lisa dropped this on me, it felt like a truck had run me over. I sat in stunned silence, gripping my whiskey glass, as she explained. She told me that ever since the girls left for college, she'd been battling feelings of emptiness and sadness. It was a shock. This woman, who I thought I knew better than anyone, had kept this hidden from me. She said that, for months, a coworker named Matt, someone from Human Resources, of all places, had been her emotional support through it all. Hearing that devastated me. The fact that she had opened up to another man, relying on him for emotional comfort instead of coming to me, hurt in a way I couldn't describe. But the part that crushed me was that she wanted to see him, to go on a date with him, under the pretense of figuring things out. Apparently, Matt was married, too, with kids of his own. But according to Lisa, he was pretending to be some kind of emotional savior while preying on vulnerable women like her. He probably knew exactly who to target: women who felt disconnected, distant, easy prey for someone like him. Then she looked me in the eye and said, "John, I can't keep this from you. I hope you understand, but I need to do this for myself. It's selfish, I know, but give me this one night to see how I feel." I was beyond furious. My blood was boiling, but I knew Lisa. Once her mind was set, there was no changing it. She finished talking, and I just sat there, staring at her blankly. She was sitting across from me on the love seat, anxiously waiting for me to respond. The silence was suffocating, but I couldn't bring myself to speak. Instead, I finished my whiskey, stood up, and walked out of the room without saying a word. Lisa trailed behind me, begging, "John, please don't ignore me. You know I had to tell you. I wouldn't lie to you, and I haven't done anything yet. We've always been honest with each other, haven't we?" I glanced at her, and she must have seen the fury in my eyes because she recoiled, curling up on the couch. I stormed into our bedroom, packed a bag with enough clothes and toiletries for a few days, and headed to the garage. I didn't say a single word to her as I passed her on the way out. Lisa ran after me, pleading, "John, please don't leave. It's just one date. After 20 years, can't you give me that?" I just shook my head, disbelief clouding my mind. That night, I checked into the Four Seasons. Yeah, $500 a night, but I didn't care. If I was going to be miserable, I was at least going to be comfortable. The texts and calls from Lisa came almost immediately, but I sent her one brief reply, then blocked her number. I told her I wouldn't be contacting her until I returned on Saturday. I imagine that hurt her as much as her words had wounded me. The next morning, I went to my office and told my assistant to block any calls from Lisa. I also made sure security knew she wasn't allowed anywhere near my office. I wasn't playing games. I had a plan, and nothing was going to change that. I'm John Mitchell, a man who gets things done. In my work, in my friendships, I'm dependable. But at home, maybe I'd been too easygoing, too accommodating. For 20 years, I loved Lisa with all my heart and treated her like a queen. Looking back, I realize that was my mistake. There's a saying that comes to mind: treat her like royalty, and she'll treat you like a servant. Well, it hit me right in the gut that maybe that's where I went wrong all along, asterisk asterisk at home. I had always been the laid-back, easygoing husband, the one who kept his temper in check and let things slide. For 20 years, it seemed like a winning formula. But now, it hit me hard that I should have been firmer, less passive. Sure, I adored my wife, and I treated her like royalty. There was a time when I thought that was the secret to a happy marriage. Now, that same idea mocked me. I had once laughed at a quote that now felt all too real: treat her like a queen, and she'll treat you like a servant. It stung, but I wasn't about to let that be my story. I refused to let her betrayal define me. The next morning, I called my brother, David, who works as a detective in Los Angeles. I knew he could help me, even though this wasn't exactly his line of work. I explained what I needed, and as expected, he was on it. He reached out to one of his contacts, Eric Dalton, a private investigator who had handled cases like this before. "Eric, it's Detective Mitchell. Listen, I've got a situation for you. It's my brother, he needs your expertise. Can you tail his wife tonight? I need all the details on the guy she's meeting, address, phone number, the whole works. And if possible, photos of them together. We're working against the clock, so I owe you big if you can pull this off. You need this guy's information tonight?" Eric asked. "And then we'll gather the rest, like photos, tomorrow morning?" "Exactly," David replied. "I'll send you the wife's details, the time she's leaving and the guy's name. Apparently, he works at some firm called Skyward Investments. His name's Matt, so it shouldn't be too hard to track him down. His wife usually gets home around 5 in the evening, but we don't know when they're leaving for their little rendezvous, so you'll need to be ready by then. Send me her info, and I'll take care of the rest," Eric assured him. When David hung up the phone, I could feel the tension in my chest start to ease, just slightly. Everything was coming together, and I was ready to face this head-on. There wasn't a moment to lose. I needed to get ahead of this before Lisa made her move. While she and Matt would be enjoying their little dinner date, I planned on paying a visit to Matt's wife. She deserved to know the truth about her husband's extracurricular activities. It wasn't purely out of spite, okay, maybe a little, but mostly, it was about exposing the truth. She had the right to know what kind of man she was married to. After arranging the details with Eric, I made another call, this time to my old friend Jake. Jake had been through the ringer a few years back with a brutal divorce that left him disillusioned with the whole idea of marriage. Instead of seeking another relationship, he turned to something simpler, an escort service. No feelings, no attachments, no drama. Just mutual satisfaction without the emotional mess that often comes with relationships. It was starting to make a lot more sense to me now. It wasn't cheating if it was just transactional, right? And it was definitely cheaper than dealing with a wife who couldn't stay loyal. Jake gave me the contact info for a reputable service, and before long, I had a plan of my own. I booked a night with a gorgeous brunette, someone young and lively. I even threw in an extra grand for the situation. But this wasn't just about physical attraction. No, I wanted the full girlfriend experience. I needed someone who could act the part, someone who could seamlessly blend into my life if Lisa happened to walk in on us. The agency assured me that this woman would be perfect, she'd play the role of a devoted partner, and no one would be the wiser. It wasn't about vengeance anymore, though I'd be lying if I said that wasn't part of it. At this point, I just wanted to reclaim my sense of control. I wasn't going to sit back while my wife made a fool of me. If Lisa thought she could step outside our marriage for a little thrill, I was ready to show her that two could play at that game. But I was going to do it on my terms, with dignity and precision. Lisa, who ran her own interior design business, hosted client meetings every Saturday. She usually didn't get home until after 6 p.m., and this weekend was no exception. As I flashed back to Thursday night, when Lisa declared her so-called independence, I could still see her sitting on the couch, frustrated by my silent departure. I imagined her rolling her eyes, probably thinking I was overreacting. In her mind, I'd get over it, just like I always did. But this time was different. This time, I wasn't going to be the easygoing husband who simply brushed things under the rug. By now, Lisa must have been growing more and more frustrated. I hadn't answered her numerous calls and texts beyond that one cold message. I could imagine her pacing, wondering if she should still go through with her plan. Maybe there was a flicker of guilt, wondering if going out with Matt was really the right thing to do. She'd probably convinced herself that it was harmless, just one fun night to blow off some steam. Dinner, maybe some dancing, and everything would go back to normal. She was always good at rationalizing her actions. By Friday night, I knew Lisa was at home alone, second-guessing her decision. Perhaps she was thinking of canceling the date, reaching out to me, making an attempt to fix things. But I also knew her well enough to understand that once the excitement of something new got a hold of her, she couldn't back out. It was too tempting. She probably started her evening ritual, took a long, luxurious bath, shaved her legs, and applied that favorite vanilla-scented lotion. I could picture her sitting at her vanity, gazing into the mirror, getting ready for her night out. She would have reassured herself that it wasn't a big deal, as she admired her reflection, the woman who still had it after all these years. A small smile likely crept across her lips as she styled her hair and slipped on those black stockings, ones she had never bothered to wear for me. Then, she probably clipped them to a new garter belt she had bought, feeling like she was preparing for something special. I thought back to Valentine's Day, the day I gifted her expensive lingerie from a high-end boutique. She had accused me of being superficial, making me feel foolish for trying to add some spice to our marriage. And now, here she was, going all out to impress someone else. That thought stung, but I knew Lisa. The guilt wouldn't last long. She was an expert at brushing aside those pesky emotions. By Saturday afternoon, I was ready. The private investigator, Eric, had already taken up his position. His white van was discreetly parked across the street from our home. Around 5 p.m., he watched as Lisa pulled into the garage. About an hour later, a car rolled up to the driveway. Matt had arrived. Eric snapped photos, recorded the car's license plate, and made a few quick calls. Within 10 minutes, I had all the information I needed. Matt's home address, phone number, everything was sent to me before they even left the house. I could imagine the scene unfolding inside my own home. Matt probably saw the hesitation in Lisa's eyes, the slight sadness she was trying to suppress. Men like him know exactly how to manipulate those vulnerabilities. He likely reassured her with carefully chosen words, pretending to be her emotional savior. "It's all right, Lisa," I could almost hear him say. "We don't have to go through with this if you're not comfortable. I understand completely. Your husband's just trying to protect you, but if only he knew how much I care about you as a friend, maybe he'd feel differently." That's how men like Matt operate, they cloak their intentions in kindness, acting like they're offering emotional support while exploiting someone's weakness. He would have reassured her, making it all seem so innocent, just a simple dinner, no strings attached. At 7 p.m., Eric watched as they got into Matt's car and drove toward a trendy restaurant downtown. He kept me updated throughout the evening. It wasn't hard to capture photos of them. Matt and Lisa were relaxed, completely unaware that every step of their night was being documented. Eric spent the next few hours capturing every moment. There they were, holding hands, walking into a club, dancing close, and kissing like they were the only two people in the room. He even managed to get a video of them slow dancing, Matt's hands wandering over Lisa's body in ways that made my stomach turn. His fingers trailed over her hips, down her back, even caressing her in ways that I had thought were reserved for me. By the time the sun came up the next morning, I had everything I needed. The pictures, the videos, it was all there. Enough to confront Lisa, and more importantly, enough to expose Matt for what he was. But before anything else, I needed to make a call. Lisa's father, Dan, deserved to hear the truth from me, and not from anyone else. At exactly 8 a.m., I dialed his number. Dan and I had been close for years, golfing partners and friends, and I knew this was going to crush him. "Hey, Dan, it's John," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hey, John. Are we still on for golf this weekend?" "I don't know, something's come up. I've got some pretty bad news." There was silence on the other end. I could feel the tension rising between us. "What's going on?" he asked cautiously. "Dan, I hate to say it, but right now, your daughter is on a date with another man. I thought things between us were okay, but apparently, she's been seeing someone from work. I can't overlook this. As far as I'm concerned, our marriage is over. She's broken the trust, and it's something I just can't forgive. I wanted you to hear this from me first, before things get worse." His voice wavered as he tried to make sense of it all. "Are you absolutely sure? This doesn't sound like her. Maybe there's been a misunderstanding. Believe me, I've had a private investigator following them. I've got proof, photos, videos, the works. I'm sorry, Dan, but I wouldn't be telling you this if I didn't know for sure." I could hear the hurt and disbelief in his voice as he processed what I was saying. He urged me to stay calm, to think things through, but I was already past that point. After ending the call, I knew there was one more person who needed to know the truth. It was time for Matt's wife to find out what her husband had been up to. I drove the 20 minutes to their house, my hands gripping the steering wheel as I ran through what I was going to say. The quiet suburban street seemed at odds with the storm of emotions I was feeling inside. I parked across the street, took a deep breath, and made my way to the front door. After a moment, it opened, and there she was, Matt's wife, Lauren. She looked a little confused, seeing a stranger at her door, but polite enough. She was in her early 30s, with striking features and long dark hair tied back in a ponytail. Her tight jeans and simple lace top gave her an effortless charm, but today was not going to be easy for her. "Can I help you?" she asked, her eyebrows knitting together in confusion. "Are you Lauren? Matt's wife?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady and composed. "Yes, that's right. Is something wrong with him? What's going on?" I hesitated for a brief moment, then spoke carefully. "Physically, he's fine. But I'm afraid there's something important you need to know. Can I come inside?" She stepped back, still unsure of what to expect, but allowed me to enter. We sat down in their modest living room, and I braced myself for what I was about to say. "I'm really sorry to have to tell you this, but right now, Matt is out on a date with my wife, Lisa." Her face drained of color, and she blinked rapidly as if trying to make sense of my words. I don't understand. What do you mean he's with your wife?" "I know this is a lot to take in, but I have proof. I hired someone to follow them, and I've got photos, videos, everything. I wouldn't be here telling you this if I wasn't absolutely sure. I thought it was only right that you find out directly from me, and not in some other way." For a few long moments, she sat there, the weight of my words sinking in. Her hands trembled as she pushed her hair back, her eyes wide with disbelief. "This can't be real," Lauren whispered, shaking her head, as if rejecting the harsh truth she had just heard. "Matt, he usually has poker nights on Fridays. Are you absolutely sure it's him?" "I wish I wasn't," I said, the gravity of the moment sinking in. "But I'm positive. The investigator followed them all evening, and he sent me everything. I'm truly sorry to be the one to tell you this." Tears started welling up in her eyes, her voice trembling as she leaned forward. "I just don't understand. Why would he do this?" I sighed, feeling a blend of empathy for her pain and anger at the situation. "From what I've gathered, Matt has a pattern of this kind of behavior. My wife isn't the first. He seems to prey on women who are going through tough times, especially married ones. It's like he knows how to manipulate their vulnerabilities." I paused before continuing, "I'm really sorry, but it looks like that's what happened here. She broke down, tears streaming down her face. I can't believe it, we have 3 kids. I thought we were happy. How could he do this to us? Seeing her break like that stirred something deep inside me. I felt guilty for being the one to tear her world apart, but I knew she deserved the truth. Slowly, I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and handed it to her, showing her the photos Eric had sent me. Her hands trembled as she took the phone, scrolling through the images, Matt and Lisa holding hands, walking into a club, dancing close, and kissing under the dim lights. With every swipe, I saw the cracks in her composure deepen, her tears flowing faster, her face reflecting the pain she must have felt in her chest. "I'm so sorry, Lauren," I said quietly. "I know how hard this is." She wiped her eyes, and her expression started to harden, like the reality of what Matt had done was finally settling in. "What am I supposed to do now?" she asked, her voice barely steady. "What am I going to tell our kids?" "I honestly don't know," I replied, feeling the weight of her question hit me. "But you've got to think about yourself and your kids first. This isn't your fault." She nodded weakly, but her gaze remained distant, her mind clearly struggling to process everything. After a few moments of heavy silence, she looked up at me, her voice low and almost broken. "Thank you for telling me. I just don't know where to go from here." I nodded in understanding. "I'm sorry I brought this into your life, but I thought it was something you deserved to know." As I stood up to leave, she followed me to the door, still holding onto my phone like it contained the very evidence of her broken life. I couldn't fully understand her pain, but I knew it mirrored my own. We had both been betrayed by the people we loved, by the people we thought we could trust. "Good luck, Lauren," I said as I stepped onto the porch. "If you ever need anything, or if you just need someone to talk to, I'm here." Her voice was thick with emotion as she replied, "Thank you, John. I'll be in touch." Driving away from Matt's house, a strange sense of resolution began to settle in. I had done what needed to be done. I had uncovered the truth, exposed the lies, and confronted the reality of Lisa's betrayal. But this was just one chapter. There was still more to deal with. Back at the hotel, I poured myself a strong drink, the alcohol burning as it went down, and I opened the file Eric had sent earlier. The photos, the videos, it was all there, staring back at me. Every detail of Lisa and Matt's night was laid bare before me. My hands shook with rage as I watched the video of them dancing, Matt's hands resting on Lisa's hips, his lips brushing against hers like they were the only people in the world. The intimacy of it all felt like a knife to the chest. But the hardest part? Watching her in those stockings, the black ones I had gifted her months ago, the ones she had never worn for me. How could she? That thought gnawed at me, swirling around in my head like a storm I couldn't calm. How could Lisa, the woman I had shared 2 decades of my life with, the mother of my children, betray me so easily? It wasn't just about the cheating, it was everything, the distance she had put between us, the lies, the carelessness with which she treated everything we had built together. She had shattered it all, and for what? A cheap thrill with a man who didn't care about her, didn't care about us, and definitely didn't care about the wreckage he was leaving behind. By the time Lisa returned home that evening, I was prepared. I had spent countless hours going over every detail, replaying the scenes in my mind, and now it was her turn to face the consequences of what she had done. When she pulled into the driveway, she would have noticed right away that something was wrong, the knife stabbed into the front door, my wedding ring cut in half and resting on top of a note. The note read, "Lisa, last night, you broke our marriage vows and the trust we built, not to mention my heart. Since you broke that bond, I no longer consider us married. Legally, we may still be tied, but emotionally, it's over. You're free to do as you please, and so am I. I'll be taking the master bedroom, as this is still my house. You can use any of the other rooms, but my bed is no longer yours. Your belongings are in the guest rooms. Please respect my space." You wanted freedom, and now you've got it. I hope you're content with your choice and your new life. Sincerely, your ex-husband, John. I had made up my mind, and nothing was going to sway me from that decision. As Lisa pulled into the driveway, I pictured her reaction, the sudden shock at seeing the knife embedded in the door, the note flapping slightly in the breeze. I imagined her sitting in the car for a minute, taking it all in, the weight of the situation hitting her like a freight train. Her heart must have been pounding as she slowly got out of the car and approached the door. When she finally read the note, I could practically feel her disbelief and panic rising. Her world was starting to crumble, just as mine had when she confessed her interest in Matt a couple of nights before. Inside the house, I waited. I knew she would come looking for me soon enough. And sure enough, moments later, I heard the front door creak open and her hurried footsteps rushing through the house. Her voice was frantic and uneven, filled with desperation. "John! John, where are you?" Her tone was a far cry from the confident woman who had coldly told me she was going out with another man. I remained silent in the bedroom, listening as she ran from room to room, her sobs echoing in the dimly lit hallway. She'd find me soon enough. She always did. When she reached the bedroom door, I could hear her pause, her breath catching as if she was trying to gather the courage to step inside. After what felt like an eternity, she opened the door, and what she saw brought her to a standstill. There I was, lying in bed with Amber, the blonde escort I had hired for the night. She was straddling me, her curves moving with each of her motions, her long hair cascading down her bare shoulders. We didn't stop when Lisa entered. We didn't even acknowledge her presence. Lisa stood there, frozen in shock, disbelief spreading across her face. I didn't need to see her to know that every second she watched us was tearing her apart. "How could you?" she screamed, her voice shaking with fury and hurt. "You bastard!" Without waiting for an answer, she turned and ran out, her sobs and angry footsteps pounding down the stairs. She slammed the front door behind her with a force that echoed through the house. I didn't move. I didn't call after her. I let her go. Amber, sensing that her role in the night had come to an end, slipped off me and started getting dressed. "If you ever need me again, you know how to find me," she said with a sly smile before quietly leaving. Once the house fell silent, I sat up in bed, staring at the door Lisa had just slammed on her way out. The rush of satisfaction I had felt earlier began to fade, leaving behind an emptiness that gnawed at me. The revenge I had so carefully plotted hadn't brought the closure I had hoped for. Instead, it left me feeling more alone than ever. I poured myself a drink, trying to push aside the unsettling feeling gnawing at me. It wasn't guilt, not exactly, Lisa had earned this. But still, something didn't sit right. Maybe it was the look on her face when she saw what I had done. Maybe it was the reality that our marriage, which once meant the world to me, was now just a war zone of betrayal and bitterness. Later that night, I got a call from Lisa's sister, Emily. It wasn't a surprise. Lisa had probably gone straight to her after storming out. "John, it's Emily," she said, her voice firm but controlled. "Lisa's here with me. She's a mess. Look, I know you're angry, but this is going too far." "She brought this on herself," I responded, my tone colder than I meant. "She made her bed, and now she's lying in it." "I know she messed up," Emily said, her voice softening. "But you can't just throw away 20 years of marriage like this. There's still something to salvage." I laughed bitterly. "Salvage what, Emily?" "She went out with another man, betrayed me, betrayed our family. How do you come back from that?" "It's not easy, John," she sighed. "But she regrets it. She's devastated and wants to fix things. Don't just give up without even trying." "I'm not giving up," I shot back. "I'm done." The moment she stepped out with Matt, that was the end for me. "There's no fixing that." There was silence on the other end before Emily spoke again. "What about your kids, she finally asked, her voice quieter. Do you really want them caught in this mess? Don't you owe it to them to at least try? Mentioning our sons, Jake and Aaron, hit me hard. They were the only reason I hadn't walked away right away. I didn't want them to be trapped in the middle of this. But how could I rebuild something with someone who had so easily torn it all down? I'll talk to her, I finally said, the words feeling heavy. But I'm not promising anything. That's all I'm asking, Emily said, relief creeping into her voice. Just give her a chance. I ended the call and sat there, weighed down by the mess of everything. I didn't know if there was anything left worth saving, but for the sake of the boys, I would talk to Lisa. I owed them that much. The next morning, Lisa returned. She was already at the kitchen table when I walked in, looking worn and defeated. Her eyes were red from crying, and she nervously wrung her hands together, trying to steady herself. We're not getting a divorce, she said, her voice shaking but trying to sound confident. We can fix this. We love each other, John. I stayed silent, walked over to the coffee pot, and poured myself a cup before sitting down across from her. She was fidgeting, her hands twisting in her lap. After a few sips, I finally spoke. Lisa, at this point, I don't care what happens, divorce or not, it makes no difference to me. You broke the prenup, so as far as I'm concerned, the marriage is over. I don't see us as a couple anymore. You're free to be with whoever you want, just like I am. But you're not sleeping in my bed anymore. That ended the night you went out with Matt. Her face fell, and she opened her mouth as if to protest, then closed it, lost for words. John, nothing happened. He's not my boyfriend, she whispered. I'm sure you could stay with your sister, Emily, I added coldly. She'd be thrilled to have you, I'm sure. You'd be a great role model for her kids, showing them how to betray someone who loves you. Sarah sat there, stunned, her face wet with tears. Michael, are you going to stop seeing that woman? Don't you love me? Don't you want us to be together again? It's too late for that, Sarah, I said, my voice devoid of any warmth. The moment you told me you were going out with another man, you destroyed everything. Do I still love you? Maybe. But my trust in you is gone. How can I love someone who so easily walked away from our marriage? Her lip quivered as she tried to form a response, but I kept going. No real man would tolerate his wife being with someone else, but you went ahead and did it anyway. You made it clear you were going to be with another man, regardless of how I felt. Now you need to deal with the consequences. Her tears kept coming, but I had nothing left to offer her. I want to be with Candy, I said, my tone sharp and unyielding. She's young, sexy, and she gives me things I never even knew I was missing. Seeing me with her must be hard for you, but now you know what some of my pain feels like. Payback can be harsh, but you brought this on yourself. Sarah wiped her eyes, her shoulders slumping in defeat. Michael, please. As for divorce, I continued, that's your decision. We can live together as housemates and see how things go, or you can agree to the divorce, and I'll have the papers ready in a week. Your words mean nothing to me right now. They're just empty promises, and I'm done with those. She understood the finality in my voice, and it seemed to break her. The fire in her eyes dimmed, and she slumped in her chair, defeated. For the next month, I brought Candy home every weekend. We spent our time together, and Sarah hated it. She would leave the house as soon as Candy arrived, only returning after she was gone. She tried to pretend that she could handle it, but I could see the pain in her eyes every time she walked past me, every time she saw the two of us together. I'll admit, part of me enjoyed the revenge, the satisfaction of making Sarah feel the way I had felt. But as the weeks went on, the thrill of revenge started to fade. The excitement with Candy was purely physical, and after a while, the cost became too high. I couldn't ignore the fact that I was using someone to hurt another, and it started to wear on me. One Sunday night, after Sarah had returned from her sister's, I sat her down in the living room. I'm not going to keep seeing Candy, I said, the weight of the past month pressing down on me. I've realized that this isn't the way I want to live. But don't think that changes anything between us. Sarah looked up at me, her eyes filled with hope. Michael, does that mean? No, I interrupted. I still don't trust you. We're going to counseling, but this isn't some grand gesture to win you back. This is me trying to figure out if there's anything left to salvage. She nodded, her voice trembling as she spoke. Thank you. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. We'll see, I said, standing up and walking away. But don't expect forgiveness. Not yet. As I headed to bed that night, I couldn't help but wonder if there was any way to rebuild what had been lost. Sarah had betrayed me, and I wasn't sure if I could ever forgive her. But for the sake of our family, I was willing to try. Love? I asked, incredulous. Do you even know what love is, Sarah? Love isn't turning your back on your spouse and going out with someone else. You broke that promise the moment you decided to be with Ryan. So no, I don't think you understand love, and you can't give me something you don't even possess. Sarah's eyes filled with tears again as I spoke. She was visibly trembling, but I wasn't moved. Not anymore. But here's what I'll do, I said, leaning forward, trying to hold on to some measure of control. I won't see Candy anymore, not for now, at least. We'll go to counseling, twice a week, for the next 3 months. We'll talk about this, work through this. If there's anything left to salvage, maybe we'll find it. Sarah looked up at me, hope flickering in her eyes. She sprang off the couch, running over to hug me, her arms tight around my neck. Thank you, Michael. Thank you. I promise, I'll make this up to you. I'll prove to you that I love you. I pushed her away gently. Not so fast, I said sternly. I'm not forgiving you yet. This is just one last chance. Don't expect everything to be back to normal. We're far from that. Sarah nodded, biting her lip as she wiped away her tears. Now, listen carefully, I continued. We're going to start counseling this Tuesday with Dr. Reynolds. You're going to be completely open about everything. No lies. No omissions. Every ugly detail is going to come out, and we're going to have to deal with it. And just so you know, I'm not going to forget about what you did, not for a long time. Sarah nodded, her eyes wide with a mix of relief and fear. Fine, I'll do whatever it takes, she whispered. For the next few weeks, we attended therapy together. Dr. Reynolds pushed us to revisit every painful moment. Each session was grueling, but it forced us to confront the damage that had been done. Sarah finally admitted to herself how deeply she had hurt me and began to understand the consequences of her actions. The therapy wasn't easy, it brought up all the anger, the resentment, the betrayal, and forced us to pick apart every detail. After 3 months, things began to stabilize. The intensity of my anger dulled somewhat, but the pain was still there. Sarah knew she was walking a thin line, and I had made it clear, if she ever betrayed me again, it was over for good. No second chances. We made progress, but I remained cautious. There was always a part of me that couldn't fully trust her anymore. As much as I wanted to believe that things could go back to the way they were, deep down, I knew they never would. Sarah agreed to a postnuptial agreement, one that would forfeit everything if she ever had another affair. She allowed me full access to her phone, her emails, and her social media accounts, promising complete transparency. She accepted all of my terms, no questions asked. Once a cheater, always a cheater, Lydia's words rang in my mind repeatedly. And I couldn't shake them. Even though Sarah was doing everything to prove she had changed, a part of me still didn't believe her. A year later, we were living what some might call a normal life. But I kept a close watch on Sarah, monitoring everything. I wasn't taking any chances this time. Ryan's story, though, had come to a brutal end. His wife, Lydia, had divorced him after our meeting, taking the house and full custody of their kids. Ryan was left with nothing but a small apartment and child support payments. He had lost everything for a few nights of dancing and flirting. 2 years after his divorce, Ryan was attacked by a man outside a bar. The man was the husband of a woman Ryan had been seeing. The beating left Ryan in the hospital with broken bones and a long road to recovery. As they say, karma catches up with everyone. For me, things had changed. My heart wasn't as open as it used to be, and Sarah could feel it. Despite her efforts to prove her love and commitment, the scars of betrayal remained. They might fade over time, but they would never fully heal. Once trust is broken, it's nearly impossible to regain. Despite her best efforts, the image of that young woman with her husband haunted Sarah. It was a stark reminder of how far things had gone. She became consumed with guilt, always trying to prove herself, but I could see the cracks. No matter how hard she worked to regain my trust, something had fundamentally changed between us. 2 years after Ryan's downfall, I heard through the grapevine that he had been in a bar fight. Apparently, the husband of another woman Ryan had been involved with had found out about the affair and decided to settle things with his fists. Ryan ended up in the hospital with a broken arm and several fractured ribs, a fitting end for a man who had left destruction in his wake. For Sarah and me, life continued, but we were both prisoners to the past. We still had our kids to think about, and in some strange way, that kept us together. But I often wondered what would happen when they were older, when they no longer needed us to play the role of a united front. Could we keep pretending that everything was okay? The truth is, I had forgiven Sarah on some level. I couldn't hate her forever. But trust, that was another matter entirely. Once shattered, it doesn't come back easily, if at all. And though we carried on, trying to rebuild what was lost, I knew deep down that our marriage would never be the same. The years ahead would be a constant battle, one where love and betrayal danced side by side, each trying to dominate the other. I could only hope that, in the end, we would find some kind of peace. But one thing was for sure, the wounds of betrayal, while they might heal, would always leave a scar, but no matter how hard she tried, I couldn't erase the memory of her betrayal. The image of her with Ryan, the way she had so easily thrown away our marriage for a fleeting thrill, lingered in my mind. Despite her promises to remain faithful from now on, I couldn't bring myself to fully trust her again. At this point, it wasn't about love. It was about survival, keeping our family intact for the sake of our children. But deep down, I knew the damage done to our relationship was irreparable, and the cracks would never fully close. Ryan's downfall served as a harsh reminder of what infidelity could cost. Seeing Sarah's remorseful determination to fix things only fueled my growing skepticism about love and trust. 2 years passed, and Ryan's life took yet another dark turn. One night, as he left a bar, he was confronted by a man named Eric, someone whose marriage Ryan had wrecked through one of his previous affairs. Hours later, Ryan was found unconscious on the pavement, his arms broken, ribs fractured, and his manhood permanently damaged. It seemed he still hadn't learned his lesson. There's an old saying that now feels more relevant than ever: not one scar on my heart came from an enemy, they were all inflicted by those who claimed to love me.